It's been an occurrence within Australia since about 2008, when in the Chinese mainland there had been an epidemic of tainted, poisoned, and cheap newborn, infant, and toddler formula, where Chinese children were sickened from consuming these said products, and tragically some even died from the faulty items, resulting in a scandal that affected the Chinese domestic infant formula market. But in the years since then, even though supposedly the Chinese infant formula manufacturing industry supposedly reformed, fears about the baby formula within the country in terms of quality still remained very high in concern with parents in the years that followed. Even smaller claims about infant formula being manufactured with powder instead of the ingredients needed or normally used for baby formula as a filler. These reports did not ease the population's fears and mistrust about Chinese formula. This was around the time when overseas Chinese students studying and living in Australia in large numbers for the first time, combined with mainland tourists, discovered the quality and exotic foreign appeal of Australian baby formula. Before this time, all across Australia, where Chinese communities were located in Australia, were able to buy infant formula of various brands when needed or wanted. But this would later change. With the scandals back in China resulting in loss of trust, overseas Chinese started to buy infant formula for their own uses, and even discovering the lucrative aspect of buying the formula with the Australian dollar and exchanging it for profit when converted into the Chinese renminbi. It was discovered nationally that there was an extraordinarily lucrative market to be had with these Chinese buying the Australian baby formula and shipping it back to the mainland of China to be resold in the Chinese markets, often at higher prices than what they were bought for. These examples were originally only in Chinese communities across Melbourne and Sydney, but eventually spread to all Chinese residences across the entire country. From what was learned from news sources, these people who made a living literally buying formula to resell overseas to the Chinese mainland are called Daigo, a word with dubious Mandarin origins. More than 10 years of this gained international attention, with the Australian formula manufacturers even noticing the Chinese interest and even marketing especially for the overseas consumers. Eventually, all Australian formula manufacturers, regardless of brand or name, were under increased pressure due to the constant Daigo buying most of the shipments as soon as they are put onto shelves in stores. In certain communities within Australia, for example, in the community of Hurstville, where it's estimated that 25% of the population are immigrants from mainland China, there have been videotaped accounts of entire quote-unquote squads on alert outside stores in the hours or minutes before they open for customers to watch for shipments of formula being brought in for store sale. Other accounts have long lines forming from infant product aisles and literally standing next to, or sometimes even hounding over employees as soon as they bring out the boxes to the aisles to unpack and to place onto shelves, and taking them as soon as the employees remove their hands from the said baby products once they're put onto the shelves. Even to the extent where Chinese are only allowed to buy a maximum of 2 cans per formula per visit, in an attempt to stave off the rapid buying of these products, but these quotas were rarely enforced among store employees due to the sheer impossibility of it. The backlash and anger from Australians over the lack of formula on a national level now has led to Chinese being heckled and ridiculed in markets across the country. There have been videotaped accounts of Australians openly mocking them for stealing or buying the formula due to a constant negative social media and news reporting on the Daigo squads. The presence and influence and reputation has been that bad. There have been varied accounts about as to how much exactly the formula can be resold overseas in China. One internet user from Australia visiting Shanghai actually put information onto the internet and even pictures about what he had discovered. These said photos show bronze from Australia being A2, Aptamil, and Bellamy being sold. The details highlight that, for example, individual tins of A2 Platinum Stage 2 marketed for 458 yuan, roughly 90 Australian dollars, and Stage 3 for 428 yuan, which is roughly 82 Australian dollars at the time. These price differences were roughly 3 times more than the shelf prices back in Australia. In January of 2019, police in New South Wales broke up an illegal Chinese operation operating in Sydney, with links to Melbourne of Chinese actually stealing baby formula and having links to an underground black market with connections to secret markets based in mainland China. This was the first real, true example of a regional or even national crime operation to the Daigou, or to the baby formula epidemic that swept the country, and officially on public news showed the drastic extent to which the Chinese would obtain the Australian infant formula for use overseas. The said operation made 1 million Australian dollars in terms of revenue, just from 12 months of operation within the Greater Sydney area alone, from news sources. Other estimates had the amount of illegal gains being even more than this. It was now more than just the Daigou squads buying and reselling the formula and reaping the profits. This was the first publicized, internationally seen examples and proof of illegal markets in both domestic and international with links to Australia. The social media in Australia had frustrated posts and comments, and even videos and photos of parents claiming that the Chinese were stealing the formula rightfully meant for Australian babies, and they were having extraordinarily hard times finding formula for their newborns, infants, and toddlers. Some internet users in Australia commented that it used to be rather easy to buy formula for little ones. They just go to their local store, find reasonable amounts of stock, buy it, and use it for their own children. But now, with everything considered, they have to go either to more remote locations outside the range of the Daigou squads, be prepared to fight against the Daigou for the formula in areas where they normally operate, or buy whatever is left on the store shelves after the Daigou picked all available formula and left the undesirable bronze left. Others have even vented frustration that the government, both regional and now national, are not doing enough to help the plight of Australian families from the threat of the Chinese Daigou. Online discussions range from people of Chinese descent to buy the formula at all, to employees at supermarkets being more strict about the Chinese that buy the formula. Nothing at all has been implemented thus far. It even goes farther than that, with an unofficial visit from the small amount of Chinese warships that arrived unannounced in Sydney Harbour in June of 2019, obtaining and putting boxes of the highly sought baby formula onto their ships and leaving the country. Social media vented claims that if something like this could be done with no real protest from the Australian government, then no babies in Australia were safe from the epidemic of the Chinese stealing Australian infant formula.